2016, the year that made InfoWars seem actually pretty normal. Video games really got overshadowed by the epic pit fight of a presidential election, but I got a head start this year and started writing my notes in April because I'm too smart for politics. The Nice Try Bethesda Award goes to Doom 2016. Bethesda put their name all over Doom 2016. I can only assume to trick people into thinking they're still cool. But you can tell it's not a Bethsoft game because it isn't cobbled together from Gamebryo and duct tape. Doom 2016 is a great game, but if you buy it, you're supporting Bethesda, and I'm not totally comfortable with that. The Bethesda Softworks Award for most pathetic cash whore thing Bethesda did this year goes to Skyrim Remastered. How stupid do you have to be to buy this game? No, don't answer that yet. Follow-up question, how stupid do you have to be to get excited that it might, not even will, but might come out for the Nintendo Switch? Skyrim is 5 years old. It predates the fucking Wii U. If Nintendo was still a serious player in the console market, the game would have been a launch title for their last shitty system with no games. And anyway, everybody with a halfway functional computer can barely contain the derisive laughter and contents of their bladder to see console dudes getting moist at the thought of a slightly prettier version of fucking Skyrim. Here's a fun behind-the-scenes fact for you. When I made the 3 reasons I don't like Skyrim video, I legitimately didn't hate the game. Well, I do now. It really has aged like a fine chicken salad sandwich. In case you ever wonder why my more recent rant videos aren't more even-handed, just check out that Skyrim video. I was just about as polite and inoffensive in that video as I am capable of, and people still lost their shit. If saying I'm not a huge fan of Skyrim generates the same level of death threats and vitriol as saying Serious Sam seriously sucks, and it does, then why bother with polite? Anyway, the one ray of sunshine in all this is that Skyrim is now being marketed as a game from, and I'm not making this up, the creators of Fallout 4. It's as if they think gamers have no long-term memory, which, come to think of it, is true. Carry on, Bethesda. Don't work too hard, since it obviously doesn't matter. The award for Most Expensive Expansion Pack is a tie between Dark Souls 3 and Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Both of these games refuse to innovate in any way on the formula established by their predecessors. It's honestly a dead heat between which game is more stagnant. Both of them are still good, but it's the kind of good you've already played through about 86 bajillion times in the last few years. Dark Souls 3 is just an expansion pack to Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 1. It is literally identical to the last 2 games in every way that matters. It has the same weapons, the same items, and the same enemies with a few new skins on top. It has the same levels, the castle, the undead city, etc. But at the same time, it has some weird changes to some iconography, like the constantly changing hollowing/embering mechanic. It behaves exactly the same as it always has, but they've changed the lore behind it from hollowing to embering, and it doesn't make any sense. And really, guys, just let me level up at any fucking fire. I don't want to have to teleport twice just to increase one of my stats. The game is also still fucking broken in the usual way. Dark Souls is one of those tough but unfair games I've talked about before. If it was fair, enemies wouldn't be able to hit you through walls or pull off moves you can never do, like changing directions in midair or hitting you with a thrusting attack while you're standing behind them, or swing their weapons without hitting the walls. That doesn't make it unbalanced, it's just important we know what we're talking about when we use words like fair. The game makes a reputation on being hard, but almost all of that difficulty is arbitrarily unfair shit or just broken mechanics. Oh wow, I was killed by the bogus hit detection again. Oh wow, I was killed by the shitty camera. Oh, Frabjous Day, I was killed by the horrible jump controls. Once you learn to compensate for the bullshit, the game isn't actually that difficult, and I still enjoy it a lot. Mostly I love Dark Souls because it's a game you can still play. You play the whole thing. Nothing is automated. It's old school hack and slash gameplay, but with the depths, combos, and counters of a fighting game. The basic combat mechanic is better than any game since maybe Oni in how smoothly you transition into and out of combat. It just feels natural and fun. Mankind Divided is more like Human Revolution 1.5 than an actual standalone Deus Ex game. Putting aside the disgusting pre-order mess and the unfucking real DLC shit which earns my contempt all on its own, this game is just more of Human Revolution. It has the same everything. Like with Dark Souls 3, Human Revolution has the same weapons, characters, enemies, mechanics, and plot. In the process of shitting out Deus Ex fanfiction, they're also pushing the plot of the first game out of the canon. If they keep this up, they're gonna have to retcon Deus Ex. I mean, it already doesn't make sense. Why would Gunther Herman and Anna Navarra be such freaks in Deus Ex after 2 prequels full of ridiculously hyper-modified people just roaming the streets? They're way more invested in telling their own story than they are in trying to make the prequels fit in with the plot of the original game. Let that shit sink in for a minute. Deus Ex, the greatest PC game of all time as awarded by PC Gamer back before they sucked. Deus Ex, playing second fiddle to this hyper-generic French-Canadian easy stealth takedown-focused action RPG. You want a review? Go fuck yourself. That was addressed to Eidos Montreal, by the way, not you, the viewer. My review of Mankind Divided is, go fuck yourself, Eidos Montreal. Mankind Divided is a good game as far as I can tell, but it's hard to keep playing it because it's become identical to every other game out there. I don't hate those mechanics individually, I don't even really hate them all together, but I hate them in a Deus Ex game. Almost as much as I hate the pastel color scheme. Yeah, that whooshing sound you just heard was Eidos Montreal missing the point by about a light minute. As with the first game, they painted themselves into a corner by making a sequel to a game with multiple endings. I don't know about you, but my favorite ending in Human Revolution is to blow up Panchaea and drown Jensen's loud, retarded ass. Well, that one doesn't work if he's still moping around in the sequel, and believe you me, this motherfucker is still sadder than a sober BoJack Horseman. Invisible War took bits and pieces of all three Deus Ex endings and combined them into one new ending. Morrowind did the same thing with Daggerfall's multiple endings. Mankind Divided does the same trick, it just feels more awkward when the outcome affects you, the player character who features in both games. So in Mankind Divided, even if you didn't destroy Panchaea, it collapsed anyway, and even if you broadcast the truth about the incident to the public, nobody listened. Even if you didn't save Seraph, he made it out just fine, and even if you didn't choose to destroy his business, it fell apart anyway. It doesn't really bother me that they had to retcon the plot to make this game work, because I'm already so bothered that they made another one at all. And the last thing I wanted to do was buy all the same augmentations again. It sucks from a storytelling standpoint because Jensen's augs shouldn't just turn off at random. And it sucks from a gameplay standpoint because nobody likes having to unlock the same basic shit in the sequel. DXMD has some new augs supposedly installed in Jensen's system while he was in Alaska, suffering from a bout of explosive amnesia. The new ones are pretty desperate. It's obvious they had a hard time coming up with new things to do with augs. Blade launchers? No thank you, I already have plenty of projectile weapons. One of the new augs is a new interpretation on the old standby dermal armor. Oops, I read that wrong. I meant to say, one of the new augs is an excuse to pack the game with more fancy triangle shit. It's an active aug rather than a passive one, so there's no reason to invest in it. The bloat is back. Of course, they can't just give you more augs, so now there's an overclocking mechanic where you have to disable unwanted mods to free up some extra battery, or heat, or SCSI ports. It's basically stolen from Chrome, but most of that game was stolen from Deus Ex to begin with, so the circle of unoriginal ideas is complete. There are plenty more generic, stupid ideas. Nothing could make me like Deus Ex less than adding a crafting system that allows you to toil away with such endlessly entertaining busy work like making a battery out of 100 screws. Not all the shit you pick up can be used for crafting though, some of it just exists to be sold, which really is the video game equivalent of taking empties to the bottle return. Mankind Divided, a game about collecting vendor trash and curating a collection of hipster microbrews. Awesome. That's about all I have to say because I'm running out of SCSI ports to plug my Angry Rant dongles into, but here are two more random things that make me angry. Thing the first, Mankind Divided has very detailed levels like Human Revolution, but they're still full of a bunch of duplicate books. And some of them are the same books from the last game. It's like Jensen just keeps a duffel bag full of these things to sprinkle around wherever he goes. Or maybe it's like an environment artist at Eidos Montreal is getting paid way too much. I can't tell which. Thing the second, it feels like the game is supposed to be more of a shooter this time around, but it's still not a shooter because you have to play ball with the shitty cover system. The game would benefit from a greatly reduced pace of combat to let the action scenes breathe a bit. It has the same frenetic pace as Fear, but without the slow-mo mechanic or the precise controls. It just feels unfinished. And if you want to talk about takedowns, holy shit. If you're unclear what my position is on one-button takedowns, go check out my Deus Ex Examined video. The short version is they're like QTEs in drag, but without any facade of challenge. And in Mankind Divided, they're even less enjoyable because they're hard to see. Pan the camera out a bit, fucksticks, at least let me watch. The Nintendo needs money, let's crank out a pointless handheld cash-in before the release of a real follow-up to a successful series award, with microtransactions, goes to Pokemon Go. Hey, did you even play Pokemon Go? No. Well, how do you know it deserves the NNMLCOAPHCIBTROARFUTASS award? How do you not? The award for Most Disappointing Game of the Year, also known as the Max Payne 3 Award or the Rockstar Games Award for Pretentious Bullshit, No Man's Sky. For those of you saying No Man's Sky isn't disappointing because you had to manage your expectations going in, Pay attention because I'm only going to say this once, although since it's on YouTube you could always rewatch it later. Before launch I was pretty sure No Man's Sky was going to be a disaster because of the huge gulf between what was shown and what was speculated. It's important to separate the two. If you judge NMS based on the perpetual media frenzy that surrounded it, then it's probably the worst game of all time. If you judge it based on what the developers said and what was shown in trailers, which painted the game as a bit of Spore meets Minecraft meets Star Citizen, well, it's honestly still pretty bad. Even when you pare away the absurdity from the pre-launch hype, the developers still promised content they could not deliver on. No, I wasn't expecting it to be Star Citizen, but I was still expecting a halfway decent game for $60 fucking dollars. What No Man's Sky actually is just Minecraft in space, and that's okay because I like Minecraft and I like space. I was also sort of hoping for a space exploration game that wouldn't require me to do a lot of bitch work before it got going. Well, 1 out of 2 ain't bad. At its core, No Man's Sky is one of those quiet, contemplative games I am rarely in the mood for. Wandering around, listening to a good soundtrack, and collecting bits of material before blasting off into space towards the next star system, there is some appeal in that. The game still has a bucket load of heinous issues that Minecraft does not have. You find the same exact plants and shit on every planet, but you have to scan them again and the game pretends they're new. When you're lucky, there's at least a palette change, but usually it's the exact same plants and the exact same mineral formations as the last planet, and yet the game pretends they're brand new and never before discovered. Except by the Sentinels and the other aliens and the 10 times you discovered them already on the last 10 planets. Cataloging 100% of the plants and animals is a chore, so it's something you'll probably just do once on one planet, just to say you did, and then you forget about it completely on every planet thereafter. It doesn't take long for the gameplay to open up to the point where you only land on a planet to get a brief refill on crafting materials before piecing out to another system with the warp drive. Discovering new stuff also isn't that impressive. It's not like, ooh, I've discovered a new species of plant, this could lead to some medical breakthroughs. No, it's, oh, I've discovered a new species of plant. Let's see, it's elemental carbon. All these fascinating and beautiful alien plants and geological formations boil down to iron and carbon. And the worst part is, every single planet is inhabited with flying sentinel bots. Every single planet. And I never found a planet that didn't also have hundreds of alien bases. Yes, explore a quintillion planets nobody has ever been on before and never will, except for the native Sentinel life and the other 3 spacefaring alien races. Yeah, right, and Leif Erikson discovered America. And what are you even discovering? All the space stations look huge, but inside is one long hallway with 2 doors at the end. Every outpost and building on every planet is the same, and every alien interaction is the same. You talk to them, they ask you for help. You supply them with a handful of the correct material for the situation, and they reward you with a new word, a blueprint for some technology, or a new location to explore. Frequently you find computers that all have the same simple number puzzle on them, and when you solve it, you're given coordinates for a new planet or something. It's the same everywhere you go, so you only discover one thing, one time in the first 10 minutes of gameplay, and repeat it ad nauseum for infinity. Interacting with aliens is also a bit messed up. You can get into an endless farming loop for carbon and new words. Give the alien 20 carbon and request a new word. Give the alien 20 carbon and request fuel. The alien gives you back 60 carbon. Give the alien 20 carbon and request a new word. Repeat ad nauseum. The only thing keeping me from spending a solid hour and farming up all the words in the EEGG language and a small fortune in carbon is the sheer unadulterated boredom of the game. No Man's Sky could stand to start with a better plot hook to keep you sustained for the early boring stuff. By the time you arrive on your second planet, you'll probably feel like the game is completely played out in just the first few hours, and you've got several more hours to go before anything of interest actually happens. The plot hook is buried a bit too deeply in the game, I think. All that I could easily tolerate to just enjoy the exploratory atmosphere, except holy fuck baskets, the PC port is a broken pile. The game hangs up constantly, which is infuriating, and dropping the settings to almost minimum didn't alleviate that much. For a while I was getting constant display driver crashing and recovering messages, even though the game was able to tough it out and hang in there. But sometimes you just get a good old-fashioned CTD, where the game shits the bed so hard you end up unceremoniously looking at your icons and wallpaper right as something interesting was about to happen. This game is a product of a developer engaged in competitive lying with Star Citizen. A Star Citizen demo full to bursting with vintage bullshit dropped recently, and it looks spooky close to NMS's pre-release materials. It's even got the same scripted sandworm sequence. I think making empty promises is like a sport to these people. The Examine Life of Gaming Game of the Year is Brigador. Normally I wouldn't give a Game of the Year award to an indie game, not because indie games can't be incredible classics, it's just that they aren't. I've talked about some really excellent indie games on the show before, like Broforce, Teleglitch, FTL, and I don't know, probably Bastion, Spin Tires, Terraria, but all of those great games were still outclassed by real games in their respective years. Brigador isn't outclassed by fucking anything. This is the kind of game that doesn't get made much anymore, but I suppose you could call it a mission-based isometric shooter, like with the old Desert Strike series, or more appropriately the Genesis and SNES Battletech game. Brigador is an isometric shooter where you have to destroy objectives on an open map and then escape. However, Brigador isn't content with being your average retro-styled piece of crap indie game with a lazy bleep-bloop soundtrack and pixel graphics, so everything that made those isometric shooters great is ratcheted up to the maximum with new technology. The graphics are dark and colorful with enough neon to please any Gen Xer, and shit blows up on a nigh constant basis. There's a huge variety of mechs and vehicles with customizable weapons loadouts, and you can turn the whole map into smoking rubble if you want. The only real problem I have with it is that the hovercraft vehicles are impossible to control due to the way the game tries to force its perspective on you. Also, the smaller, weaker vehicles don't really make for compelling stealth gameplay, so all the real fun is in the badass tanks and mechs. The Examine Life of Gaming multiplayer game of the year, or I guess the multiplayer game that I played this year, is Battlefield 1. I don't have enough time to play Battlefield 1 and Titanfall 2, so I opted for Battlefield 1, and, you know, I guess it worked out okay. To start with, of course, the game doesn't play like World War I, but 1942 didn't play like World War II. Battlefield is an abstraction of combat. The games are themed like major eras of conflict, and that's fine. Somebody made a game that actually plays like the Great War called Verdun, and it's just a bad game. Yeah, I did have some ideas about what could be done with Battlefield 1. What I envisioned was a game more like Titanfall, where the field of battle, just didn't want to say battlefield, would be staffed mainly by NPC grunts led by officer player characters. That way you can justify giving all the players the fancy guns while still keeping bolt actions in the hands of most characters in play. And it wouldn't have to be fancy, just spawn, run past a group of leaderless soldiers to have them stick to you and then attack a point. Maybe include a point command that tells them what to shoot at. That's all you really need to give it a bigger scale. More could have been done with the game, definitely, but that would sacrifice the core conquest game mode that makes Battlefield games a viable alternative to the claustrophobic death matches of other shooters. Because of the World War I weapons, the balance has gone kind of crazy. They did a lot of research work to justify any auto-loading or automatic guns they could find, which means that only snipers have to use a bolt-action rifle. But that proliferation of firepower caused some serious problems. Bolt actions do an insane amount of damage, which makes sense if you've ever seen the kind of cartridges the damn thing used. It's an annoying lack of realism that an 8mm bolt-action rifle can kill a guy in one shot, but an 8mm machine gun can only kill a guy in 25 shots. Battlefield always tries to balance realism with authenticity. The guns are all real guns, the battlefields are all realistic, but it's not really authentic to have all the soldiers running around with machine guns, of which only maybe 250 were ever fielded during the entire war. I would love to see some realistic but not necessarily authentic additions, like, for example, flying aircraft carriers. Yes, Lord, the United States did in fact field 2 massive blimps that carried planes inside them, which would make for an awesome addition to attack/defend maps or a bring down the enemy blimp mode. Is it period appropriate? Nope. But who cares? Battlefield 1 is more concerned with being plausible than being authentic. Like I say pretty much every year, these games aren't perfect, but I just like Battlefield games. Battlefield 1 isn't totally polished. As usual for Battlefield, the audio is phenomenal, but sometimes it doesn't work. I was amazed by the vicious snarl of the engine on the landship tank, and then I hopped into a whisper-quiet armored car. No bullshit, Jack, some of the vehicles seem to be missing sound effects, which makes them hilariously adept at crushing people from behind like some kind of turn-of-the-last-century armored Prius. When an explosion goes off near you, the sound of fragments ricocheting overhead is more immersive than drowning in a bathtub. But then one of your buddies gets run through with a bayonet and it honestly sounds like they recorded some of the screams in a bathtub. It's a bizarre blend of Battlefield's usually stellar quality and shocking cheapness. All told, I like the game, although I'm still not relishing the idea of paying another $100 for DLC so I can keep playing it for the next year. Oh well, that was 2016. See you guys around. Well, I do now. It really has aged like a fine chicken salad sandwich. That's kind of funny. Shit. Well, how do you know it deserves the NNMLCOAPHCIBTROR? Fucking Jesus. I don't think this is even possible.
Alright, let's go back to that fire. Alright, where'd you get the clap? Because I want that.
Hey, phrasing!